Early this morning, Donald Trump took to Twitter and fired U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson. There was no phone call from the White House. Mr. Tillerson found out just like you and I did. Tonight, termination by tweet. America's top diplomat sacked and blindsided. Europe and Asia, are their eyes open for what could come next? I'm Brent Goff in Berlin. This is The Day.
No, I really didn't discuss it very much with him, honestly. I made that decision by myself. Really, it was a different mindset. It was a different thinking. When you look at the Iran deal, I think it's terrible. I guess he thought it was okay. I've worked with Mike Pompeo now for quite some time. Tremendous energy, tremendous intellect. We're always on the same wavelength. The relationship has been very good, and that's what I need as Secretary of State. I think Rex will be much happier now.
Well, we begin the day with this headline from the news magazine The Atlantic from 1 week ago. How did Rex Tillerson manage to keep his job? Well, the headline today, he didn't. If you were wondering what a letter of termination from the Oval Office of U.S. President Trump looks like, well, this is it. A tweet. CIA Director Mike Pompeo will become the new Secretary of State, and the third sentence there mentions a thank you to Rex Tillerson for his service. Now, Tillerson and Trump have never been very tight. Last year, the Secretary of State was quoted calling his boss, the president, a moron. Tillerson never denied that report. But rumors of Tillerson's imminent sacking subsided, and many diplomats expected him to be one of the few to survive the first year or two, including Mr. Tillerson himself. Well, a State Department spokesman released this statement today. The secretary had every intention of staying because of the tangible progress made in national security. And it goes on to read, the secretary did not speak to the president this morning and is unaware of the reason. Now, these are stunning words for Washington or any seat of government. Even more stunning is the fact that Tillerson's tenure as Secretary of State is considered by many foreign policy experts in the U.S. and here in Europe as one of the worst in U.S. history. Our first report tonight on Trump's ex, Rex Tillerson.
Rex Tillerson initially seemed an unusual pick for Secretary of State. The former head of ExxonMobil was an oilman from Texas with no foreign policy experience. But as a Washington outsider, he also fit in with the unconventional nature of the new Trump administration. At the start, Trump appeared to have great confidence in him.
Rex will be a fierce advocate for America's interests around the world and has the insights and talents necessary to help reverse years of foreign policy blunders and disasters.
But barely 6 months into the job, reports started to circulate that Tillerson's relationship with the president had soured.
Tillerson, are you committed to staying in your position as Secretary of State?
I'm not going anywhere.
How long will you stay for?
As long as the president lets me.
How's your relationship with the president right now?
It's good.
But the two men were known to be at odds over a number of issues, including the Iran nuclear deal. Trump said this was one reason for his dismissal.
But we disagreed on things. When you look at the Iran deal, I think it's terrible. I guess he thought it was okay. I wanted to either break it or do something, and he felt a little bit differently.
Trump was also accused of publicly undermining Tillerson on several occasions. When Tillerson talked about the possibility of direct dialogue with North Korea last December, Trump said he was, quote, wasting his time. Tillerson also appeared to be caught off guard about the recent offer of talks to Pyongyang on his trip to Africa last week. Perhaps the lowest point was when Tillerson failed to deny outright reports that he had called Trump a moron. Even so, he said he was not expecting to be fired and had wanted to stay in the job.
Well, tonight from Berlin to Washington to Tokyo to London, the timing of Tillerson's firing comes well, many are saying at the wrong time. To help us sift through the fallout, I'm joined now by Karsten Phenomen. He's our correspondent in Washington. And here at the big table with me is Boris Foreman, professor of political science at Bard College here in Berlin. Gentlemen, welcome. Tillerson spoke not very long ago about being fired. I wanted us to take a listen to part of what he had to say.
I will be meeting members of my front office team and policy planning later today to thank them for their service. They have been extraordinarily dedicated to our mission, which includes promoting values that I view as being very important. The safety and security of our State Department personnel, accountability, which means treating each other with honesty and integrity, and respect for one another.
Karsten, let me start with you. I mean, we could hear in Tillerson's voice, this man is visibly shaken by what happened today. And for all the chaos of the Trump White House, which the world has come to expect, the firing of Tillerson, I mean, it still shocked us. And the question tonight, why fire Tillerson now?
That's a very good question. It looks a bit disrespectful towards the Secretary of State, but also towards the people the Secretary of State just talked to. He just came back from a trip to Africa, and the leaders of important American allies such as Ethiopia, Kenya, Nigeria definitely will wonder why they spend time with a man who clearly had no leverage in the Trump administration at the time they met him. So that's quite disrespectful. The reason the White House gave was that President Trump wants to restructure his foreign policy and national security team ahead of a potential summit with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un. And of course, you might say that when you want to do something, you want to prepare for this, the new team should be there, and Rex Tillerson, according to the president, should not be part of it. It makes sense to do this as quickly as possible. But on the other hand, it also might not be a good idea to change horses in midstream. And also Rex Tillerson was an important voice who would disagree with the president. That might be annoying to Donald Trump, but it's important to test your ideas, and that will be missing now.
And Boris, Tillerson, if you compared to Trump, was considered around the world as this voice, a moderate voice, reliability, steadfastness, and now that's all history. So what does that mean for global order?
Well, we don't quite know yet. It's going to take a couple of months for us to find out. What we know is that, yes, Rex Tillerson was somebody seen by other state leaders and other foreign ministers as somebody they could talk to, sort of a channel towards Trump that was reliable. On the other hand, Tillerson was part of a move by Donald Trump to deconstruct the State Department. He was the chief diplomat, and diplomacy for Trump was not his strong suit, or is not his strong suit. There has been much more of a focus and emphasis on defense, on the military. So on the other hand, we don't know exactly what the consequence will be. Overall, we can see there is a shift and even stronger emphasis towards militarization.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, too, is there any way that you could win as a diplomat in the Trump White House, knowing that he really doesn't have high regard for the State Department to begin with? We know now that the head of the CIA, Mike Pompeo, will be the new Secretary of State. Here's more on the man that Trump said today, and I'm quoting, "He is on my wavelength." Take a look.
Holding. And in the presence of your son.
It was just over a year ago when Mike Pompeo was appointed head of the CIA. At the time, the Kansas congressman was a member of the House Intelligence Committee. Now the 54-year-old is set to take over at the State Department, replacing Rex Tillerson. Unlike his predecessor, he agrees with the president on scrapping the Iran nuclear deal. He also downplayed Russian meddling in the 2016 presidential election. As CIA chief, he has been active in trying to contain North Korea's nuclear ambitions.
I want everyone to understand that we are working diligently to make sure that a year from now, I can still tell you they are several months away from having that capacity.
One similarity with his predecessor, he doesn't have a lot of foreign policy experience. But Pompeo is one of the president's closest allies. Trump stressed their personal friendship.
I've worked with Mike Pompeo now for quite some time. tremendous energy, tremendous intellect. We're always on the same wavelength. The relationship has been very good, and that's what I need as Secretary of State.
Friendship or no friendship. If confirmed by the U.S. Senate as the country's top diplomat, Pompeo will be working for a boss who has shown little regard for diplomacy.
Yeah, and Boris Trump reportedly said that he wants a completely new national security team in place in time for these talks with North Korea. A new team to dive into some of the most dangerous negotiations in living memory. Does that make sense?
I guess from Trump's perspective, it does. He's somebody who really insists on loyalty. This is something that has been, as we're told, a characteristic of his work as a business leader in the Trump organization. That's something we've seen from the very first day, that loyalty is really the chief asset if you want to be part of the Trump team. Tillerson apparently was contradicting him often, which for Trump is something difficult to deal with. And I guess he sees these negotiations as something important, maybe as something even where he can leave an imprint on world history if North Korea were to de-arm.
Yeah.
And so I guess that he thinks it's important. He can do it better with somebody else. And from his own perspective, it makes sense. On the other hand, of course, it creates a lot of volatility and it creates a lot of wild cards and difficult situations.
Karsten, Mr. Trump said today that he will soon have the team in place that he wants. Now, what was he telling us there? Does this mean that everything since day one of his administration has been Trump testing the political waters? I mean, casting calls by the president. Is that what we've been watching?
Yeah, I believe this statement is an attempt to gloss over the fact that Donald Trump came into the White House completely unprepared for the job. This has been a year mainly of chaos and trial and error. Of course, there were some successes for Trump from the Republican perspective, such as the new tax law. But generally, this White House resembled more a giant reality TV show than the government of the most powerful nation on earth. Let's remember when Trump came into office, he said he knew the best people, he would have the best people. Turns out he didn't have the best people, and apparently he still doesn't have the best people. And I think the bottom line is most of the chaos that we've seen is not even caused by the people around Trump. It's the man in the Oval Office who's causing most of the chaos.
And Karsten, I'll throw this curveball at you. The condition of the State Department, foggy bottom, as it's known in Washington. I mean, we've heard that there have been senior level diplomats leaving in droves since Mr. Tillerson became Secretary of State. So, I mean, his tenure there, no one was celebrating him being there to begin with. I mean, is he leaving the State Department in Washington? I mean, what are you hearing? Is he leaving the State Department there a shadow of what it used to be?
Yes, and that is partly his fault, not alone his fault. Of course, also the president. It's also the president's fault because Donald Trump wants to be the only really important actor, and he has sidelined the State Department. But Rex Tillerson also didn't push back a lot when it came to attempts by Trump to sideline the State Department. He was concentrating on an internal reform which didn't go down well with his own employees. There are reports that he brought a few advisors with him and isolated himself against his own people in the State Department. And there are many, many unhappy people there. And they hope that things will get better with Mike Pompeo, never mind his political views. But at least Mike Pompeo is a Washington insider who knows how to use such apparatus such as the State Department.
And Boris, this decision to fire Tillerson is going to fuel the school of thought here in Europe that the U.S. is no longer a reliable partner. I mean, you've got people here in Germany, Sigmar Gabriel, for example, saying that we have to forget about the U.S. It's time now for Europe to take care of itself. I mean, what can we expect? Because we've got a new German government that is going to work tomorrow. Angela Merkel is taking the oath of office again tomorrow.
Absolutely right. I think some see a chance in this because the EU has to reposition itself. Maybe a chance for the EU to reassemble and to reintegrate, to develop its own identity, also its own defense capabilities. But what we're seeing is certainly a pivot, a major pivot. Trump is the first president really in 120 years to argue only based on interest and not on values. So all his foreign policy statements are about common interests, never about the same ideas and shared values. So I think this is a major change, and it's going to have a major impact on the world order.
Carsten Van Namen, our correspondent in Washington. Thank you very much, Carsten. And here at the Big Table, Boris Foreman, professor of political science at Bard College here in Berlin. Thank you. I'll ask you if you could to give me your attention. We've been talking all day about Rex the X. There have been as many nicknames for Trump team members as the number of Trump team members who have come and gone since Trump took office 14 months ago. Between 19 and 39 departures have taken place under President Trump so far. Now, that is a staggering number, and these are just some of them. Now, the ones who stand out include, just a week ago, Trump Chief Economic Advisor Gary Cohn. He left, you may remember, after disagreements over Trump's steel tariffs. Trump's right-hand man and the architect of his America First campaign, Stephen Bannon, he left back in August when Michael Wolff's tell-all book, Fire and Fury, was published. And Steve Bannon, as you may have heard, was seen this past weekend with the National Front in Paris, saying it's a badge of honor to be called a racist. FBI Chief James Comey, sacked by Trump last May, the Democrats say, to stop the FBI investigation into Russian election meddling. And the security advisor, Michael Flynn, that's where it all began, he was forced to resign just a few weeks after Trump took office. Now, you have to remember, Obama also fired him. Of course, under Trump, he had to resign over meetings with a former Russian ambassador that he did not disclose. Well, tonight, the latest to leave, America's top diplomat, Rex Tillerson. The termination by tweet getting lots of criticism around the world, including right here in Germany.
The United States is indispensable for world order, for European security, and the alliance, the friendship are very, very entrenched. The president has a very special style, and he raises questions, also that of predictability, but we should not conflate and confuse the president with the people and the country. So we have to work through this period. We have to recognize that the role of the United States is shifting and that there are roots and reasons why Donald Trump has been elected for president, and these reasons will endure his presidency. So also the Europeans have to shift and to adapt, but the close relationship, the friendship, must not be put into question from either side. It is and remains a principle, a cornerstone of world order and of the transatlantic relationship.